He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, this is the Alex Marlow Show, and I'm glad you're here. Hopefully, all of you got a chance to catch up on some of my shows from last week. They're really good. I got to plug my Tom Homan interview from Friday. It is one of the reasons why you do a show like this. So hopefully all of you check that out. He was unbelievable. I even got him tearing up at a couple of points, talking about some of the reasons why he does the things that he does, but some other great interviews last week as well when I was on the road in D.C. And one of the things I did is I got to go to the Italian embassy, and I will tell you, people in the Italian embassy were very, very pleased that Columbus Day is back in vogue. No longer are we doing Indigenous Peoples Days, even though I do like the Elizabeth Warren trolling that does take place when we're celebrating the Indigenous peoples. And hey, no disrespect to the Indigenous peoples. It's just that we like our Italians and we like Christopher Columbus. Great explorer and definitely worth celebrating one day a year. So very happy about that. And I'm glad our friends in Italy are enjoying it. So a nice time over at the Italian embassy. I said flat out, my main goal is I just want to become the Italian ambassador. That's all I want. And then if I can't do that, then I definitely want to at least interview the prime minister. So we had a historic day today. We were talking about Middle East peace. We were talking about some developments in China tariffs. I will have an update for you on the government shutdown, or maybe not. Brandon Gill will be here, very popular congressman, and he's making America handsome again, which is important. We want to do that. That's the real Maha. No, there's two Mahas, but making America handsome again. That's good. It's a good look. We like the Handsome Caucus here because, we got to do a visual show. Everything's visual now, even audio content. But I'm excited to share with you. I've got a new sponsor I'm going to bring the show, Relief Band, and I'll introduce them to you by way of confiding in you about something I have to deal with. I'm pretty sturdy, pretty robust, but I do get the motion sickness. So I can't read in the car. And this is a bummer because I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I like to work. And I live adjacent to Los Angeles, so I'm constantly in the car and I'm constantly in traffic. And I will tell you that what I've been doing lately is I've been using Relief Band, which is a technology that you put on your wrist and you wear it, and it sends signals to your brain that relieves nausea. And you can use it if you have motion sickness like I do, but anxiety, migraines, even hangovers, morning sickness, chemotherapy. You wear the band, it gives you relief from nausea, and you can change the intensity depending on how you're feeling that day. Drug-free, non-drowsy, you're not popping pills, works quickly, and zero side effects. And that's the cool thing about it for me, is that I'm not trying to inject stuff or consume stuff that I can avoid. So you wear it. It's not magic. This is science. And this was FDA approved, clinically proven, recommended by doctors nationwide. And for me, it's been a game changer because now I can get some work done in the car, which I could not do. And I'll tell you, can't tell you how many things I would like to do in parts of the city that would require me to sit in traffic for a long time. And I can't do it because I need to be able to read all day. And I can't do that without the motion sickness. And now finally we got a solution. It is Relief Band. And guess what, my audience, 20% off plus free shipping if you use the code Alex. Reliefband.com. That's RELIEFBAND. Reliefband.com. Reliefband.com. Promo code Alex. 20% off plus free shipping. That is reliefband.com. I have no idea if you have any regular nausea in your life and how many of us can say we don't. I don't know why you wouldn't try this. It's a must-try technology from my vantage point. All right, let's get into Middle East peace, and we'll let the man himself kick us off, President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Let's play this one.
This is the day that people across the region and around the world have been working, striving, hoping, and praying for. They have done things over the last month that I think were really unthinkable. Nobody thought this could happen. With the historic agreement we've just signed, those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned, and further work goes on having to do with the, sadly to say, bodies. Together we've achieved what everybody said was impossible. At long last, we have peace in the Middle East, and it's a very simple expression. Peace in the Middle East, and we've heard it for many years, but nobody thought it could ever get there, and now we're there. I want to congratulate everybody sitting in these first few rows and standing behind me. I don't know why they chose to stand, but I promise I'll make it short, okay? We are not going to keep you standing for long. These are great leaders. After years of suffering and bloodshed, the war in Gaza is over. Humanitarian aid is now pouring in, including hundreds of truckloads of food and medical equipment and other supplies, much of it paid for by people in this room. Civilians are returning to their homes. The hostages are reuniting. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm just watching it backstage.
Yeah, so absolute jubilation in Israel today. It's the hostages being returned. I'll give you some of the details on that. So first of all, it was all 20 of the living hostages returned to the Red Cross and then back in Israel. We have footage at Breitbart.com. We have images. It's beautiful stuff. Families being reunited. And how many of you, if you had a family member in such a situation, would think there's a shadow of a chance they would come home? I mean, maybe you would. I don't know how people deal with such unforeseen circumstances, but it must be just feel like a total miracle. And that's what it is. And it was all brought to you by President Trump. So, and then he went to Egypt for a summit. And this is the Egypt Peace Summit. Egypt, of course, one of the most powerful countries in the Arab world. I asked Joel Pollack on our Breitbart Fight Club show today why he thought Egypt. And he said maybe it was an homage to the Camp David Accords, which were forged there, at least partially. But also a signal that this is not just a Middle East thing, but we're talking Asia, we're talking Africa. This is a global, Europe. This is a global peace that Trump wants to bring. And he's looking down the field at a whole new vision for the region. And we get to keep an eye on a couple of things. This will not be perfect. Trump is, remember, the number one marketer, number one salesperson on earth. And this is a historic event. This is potentially the greatest thing he's ever done. But we got to keep an eye on a few things. They were, as Trump alluded to, they have to return dead hostages as well. So far, only 4 of 28 have come home. So we're going to keep an eye on that one. And there is disagreement on how much Hamas is going to disarm. Israel says that Hamas is going to disarm, but Hamas did not expressly agree to that in the negotiated peace. So it is, first of all, Hamas, for it to fully disarm would leave it even more vulnerable than they already are. They have no friends anymore. So they'd be incredibly vulnerable from a security perspective. And I think that that's something that they got to think about. And I also liken it to having Hamas fully disarmed is a lot like asking a leopard not to have spots. There is no Hamas without being armed, because that's where they derive their entire power, is from the physical threat they pose to countries like Israel and to people like the Jews. So we got to keep an eye on that, though, because they need to be basically disarmed. But what that looks like, we got to see. But overall, this is so big. There are so many new countries that are, I think, part of this movement for peace in the region. Even Syria, which had the regime change where they have jihadis running the government, but they seem to be really strategic. And they don't have any enemies in the region. Joel made this point to me on the Breitbart Confidential show, that there's now no serious rivals to Israel in the region. And there's going to be a lot of people saying mean stuff, and there's going to be a lot of anti-Semitic tweets that'll get fired off, and a lot of trash talk. But overall, there's no imminent military threat to Israel at this time, and that is brand new. So long as Trump's in power, Iran is not going to be a major threat. And now that Hamas has been essentially disarmed, we'll see. Keep an eye on it. Then they're not a major threat, and that means we could start building. And this is where Trump's vision, I think, truly is. I don't even need to say genius. That's not the point, but it is accurate. If he gets these countries working together on things where there is shared financial interest, mutual financial benefit, then they're just not going to want to fight with each other. It's just like, think of it on a micro level, is that, are you going to go to war or even verbal fisticuffs with people in your life who you make money with? Like, it's just not you're really inclined to think a second time before you do that. Unless you're truly fanatical when it comes to your religion, then it's just not going to happen where you're attacking people where you can benefit financially from working with them. So this is why I think America overseeing the rebuilding of Gaza, Gaza-Lago, if you will, is a chance to have a really lasting peace. Because if everyone's benefiting from the new financial opportunities in the region, and Gaza's under American influence, and Trump has taken ownership over this, so it will be. And people see not only a free Israel, but they see the opportunity for great financial prosperity that's shared across countries. Just unbelievable stuff. And it's all brought to you by Donald Trump. It really is. He gets the vast majority of the credit. So an amazing moment, and we'll see where it goes from here, but I've got very high hopes. Joel also made a great observation that China and Russia were not present at the Egypt summit. So it just solidifies that this is just a huge American power play, and you'd expect nothing less from our terrific president who is so good on these topics. It's also interesting to track how the Democrats are dealing with it. I played, I think it was last week's show, I played a David Ignatius, left-wing liberal commentator and journalist, talking about how, you got to tip your hat to Trump. Well, but will everyone do that? Will everyone do, and what does that look like? We saw Tony Blinken suggesting that actually Trump was just furthering Joe Biden's foreign policy in the region. Of course, this is completely ass backwards. I wrote about this extensively, and I just tweeted an article a couple of days ago that there was some of my thinking on this from a couple of years ago. But October the 7th wouldn't have happened if Joe Biden was a halfway decent politician, but he's not a terrible politician. So, and his policy was horrible, and he staffed incompetent people who had terrible ideas in the region, and he just did a terrible, terrible job with his Middle East policy. And this goes back his whole history. And I have a whole section, a third of Breaking Biden is about Joe Biden's failed foreign policies. And you don't have to take right-wingers' word for it. Center and liberal people who are generals, people who are other Democrats, have long maintained that Joe Biden had a knack for being on the wrong side of the major foreign policy issues of our time. And Israel has just been his Israel Middle East policy is on that list. So the standard bearer currently of the party is Kamala Harris, and she, over the weekend, while promoting her book that's out on MSNBC, was essentially attacking Israel. Let's play some of that.
President Trump will be on his way to the Middle East. They have this deal between Israel and Palestine. Both former Secretaries of State Hillary Clinton and Antony Blinken have commended President Trump for the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Do you agree with them? Should he be commended?
Look, I don't think that we should hold any credit where it's due. I mean, first of all, let me say about that deal.
She doesn't know how to deal with this because she has to answer in a political way when the obvious thing would be to say, hey, great job, President Trump. That's really a good one. And you do get some credit here, but you can't do that because remember, her base doesn't want Trump to get credit for anything. So everything Trump says is wrong. But also interesting framing from Eugene Daniels, who I guess on MSNBC now, he used to do Politico Playbook, where he refers to Palestine, which is not a real place. So it's there's no country Palestine. So there's Gaza, and that's but it's interesting how that's coded language for the left. That's a dog whistle to the left that, hey, I'm one of you.
I really do hope it becomes real and that the hostages are out, that Gaza is no longer being treated with such brutality of force, that aid goes in. And I commend the people who have been a part of this process. I'd commend the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the president.
A lot of folks in your party have called what's happening in Gaza a genocide. Do you agree with that?
I think that, listen, it is a term of law that a court will decide, but I will tell you that when you look at the number of children that have been killed, the number of innocent civilians that have been killed, the refusal to give aid and support, we should all step back and ask this question and be honest about it. Yeah.
In the afterword of your book.
And just moving on, just as bombshell, Israel's committing a genocide, and then we're moving on. I mean, these people are so horrible. There's no genocide. Hamas obviously was the ones with the genocidal intent when they came in October the 7th. That was the whole point, was a genocide. That's what they want. They want a genocide of Israel. They want Israel to get wiped off the map. It's genocidal. So, I just find this to be amazing, considering that have we ever seen a war where one side feeds the side that started the war and is trying to kill all of them? And that's what's happening with Israel, where Israel is actually providing food, feeding their own enemy, when their enemy was responsible for the war to begin with. I don't know any other time in history that we've seen this. And with all this humanitarian aid supposed to go to Gaza that gets intercepted by Hamas, and just the whole world giving them a pass for it. So, and then just to use the genocide terminology with Israel, it's exasperating. But sometimes when these people beclown themselves so much, it actually is helpful. Like Mehdi Hassan, who's another guy who I think was too radical for MSNBC, and who the left trots out there because he speaks clearly. So he doesn't stutter, so they think he must be very smart, but he's very bad ideas, but he says them clearly. And he had a tweet from yesterday that where he says actually what happened in Gaza is worse than the Holocaust. One of the ways in which the Gaza genocide is worse than a lot of previous genocides, even the Holocaust, is that you didn't have Nazis mocking the genocide after it was over. So, and I'm slightly editing the tweet for clarity here on the show, but that's it, worse than the Holocaust. So that's where they were at in the American left, is that what happened to Israel, who had to defend itself and has a genocidal enemy, well-funded at its gates, tiny country surrounded by somewhat adversarial, if not entirely adversarial countries who want to see them destroyed, that they're the genocidal ones. It's just so backwards. And that's just the nature of how the world works, given the media's given the way the media behaves, given the way the UN behaves, where they're basically an anti-Israel organization. But it's fine with me. I'm happy to see Harris talk like this, because it's all stuff that normal Americans are just not going to be tolerant of it if she runs for president again. Maybe it'll help her sell books to left-wingers, but that's it. In terms of her being a national or international figure, those quotes really make a difference in a negative way. Trump, interestingly, called for a pardon for Netanyahu. And you got to keep an eye on this, because Netanyahu really is a wartime president. That's sort of how I conceptualize him. I think he was put on earth to defeat Hamas. I think that's his goal. I think that's where he's at his best, where he's at his most relevant. And I think that that is where, now that if we feel like we've got a lasting peace, then what happens to him? Where does he go from there? And that's a really big question, because he seems on a personal level pretty unpopular. And I think some of the conversation about PR with the war that has come up a lot since Charlie Kirk's passing, I think that becomes more relevant if it's a peaceful time. I think it'll probably be retirement time for Netanyahu. And sometimes when countries are done with their wartime leaders, and they become subjects for criminal investigations, stuff like that. So we'll see, because he's got a lot of haters, both foreign and domestic. And so we'll see where that goes. But Trump calling for a pardon, that's interesting. And I wonder if Trump is basing that off of something that he knows that we don't. Speaking of Charlie Kirk, I want to tell you, about 3 weeks ago, Charlie Kirk was supposed to be reading this ad I'm about to read to you on LifeWise. Just 2 days before he was assassinated, he decided to support this documentary. It's explosive. His death and the violent attacks on churches and schools remind us that we are in a real spiritual battle. But there is hope. Church attendance is rising, especially among young people. And for that hope to last, we need generational change. That's why Charlie wanted you to see Off-School Property. It's in theaters October the 23rd. So it's coming up. Film tells the story of LifeWise, a nonprofit bringing Bible classes to public school students during the school day. And Charlie was excited about this mission.
So this nonprofit called LifeWise in Ohio said, okay, we'll raise the money, find the space, and the school has to allow 1 hour of religious instruction. So I just learned about this a couple days ago. This could be a revolution in government schools across the country.
Now it's up to us to carry it forward. Take your family and friends to see Off-School Property in theaters nationwide October 23rd. Find a theater near you, lifewise.org/Alex Marlow, lifewise.org/Alex Marlow. Great sponsors, and also a way to support something Charlie was into posthumously, which is nice. Anything to help Charlie. Okay, so a couple other things that are going on, some major news. In terms of government shutdown, I don't have a ton of movement to offer. So we'll talk to Brandon Gill about this, so I'll keep my comments for now pretty brief. But the House Democrats are using the shutdown to showboat. They really think they've got this as they think they can win in this regard. So they're in Washington, D.C., they're trying to get media attention. Republicans are back in their districts. Brandon's in his district when we talked to him, and they're trying to do some work, trying to talk to the people, get some stuff done. And the Republicans, they want to keep the government open. They passed continuing resolution. And it's a noteworthy contrast, because when the Democrats really did, when they were in charge, when Obama was in charge, he made the shutdown painful for Americans. And the Republicans are doing the opposite right now. It was going to be tough for Trump to keep military personnel paid. Figured out a way to move stuff around to try to minimize the pain. And it feels like things are business as usual. I was in Washington last week, and it was seeming like a little less traffic, but it seemed like things were functioning. Didn't get good air conditioning in the White House. I had to book my Tom Homan interview with the senior officials as opposed to the junior officials. It wasn't really a huge deal. And that's the whole thing, is they're trying to keep things going, whereas the Democrats tried to make it painful because they thought they could run up the score on Republicans. And it's the Democrats are saying Trump wants to use a shutdown to inflict cruelty, but it really is them who did that. They were the ones who inflicted cruelty. Russ Vought is probably not cutting as much as I want. The layoffs have been pretty modest. I think it's like 5,000 or so. That's not a lot of folks in the whole government. Just considering they employ hundreds of thousands of people is just not a lot. And I think more are coming, but it's really more of a threat. And that's the thing that's interesting, is that Trump is sometimes he carries a big stick and speaks softly. Sometimes he speaks loudly and doesn't really wield the stick. So, but not huge news to report. I'm not seeing any movement that suggests that the government's opening up anytime soon in a major way. So noteworthy. But the Politico had a headline today: Democrats are in a GOP shutdown vice. The fear is, with military pay no longer looming as a pressure point, little will stop the shutdown from continuing for several more weeks. And I don't see a quick way out. I really don't. I've been looking at it, and I just don't see it as happening anytime soon. It's interesting because could there be one thing that I pointed out last week is that, Marjorie Taylor Greene's out there and she was blaming the Republicans for the shutdown. And I got my eye on her, and she's a unique person. I tend to dwell more on the show people who I feel like are representative of trends rather than one-off interesting people. Like, I don't have a big Thomas Massey obsession, even though you guys know he's not my favorite. I think he's a big grandstander. But I don't think he represents a huge movement. I think he's really iconoclastic. I kind of think of Marjorie Taylor Greene in that group, but I think this is on the Tim Dillon podcast. But check out this quote from her, which kind of blew my mind.
Conservative, and as a business owner in the construction industry, and as a realist, I can say we have to do something about labor, and that needs to be a smarter plan than just rounding up every single person and deporting them just like that. Right. So, and I'm going to get pushed back on that, but I'm just living in reality.
This is exactly what ruined California, is that we took it so that, there's some illegal aliens that we like. So that was a slippery slope that ruined my whole state. So that's the type of stuff that we really as a movement, we settled this stuff over a decade ago when Trump came down that escalator and said they're not sending their best. That was we all weighed in, and we said that we're not going to be very tolerant of illegal immigration anymore as a party. That's not our thing. And I talked to Tom Homan about this on Friday, and I asked him, can anyone stay? And he said, if you are here illegally, you've got a problem. We all know that the violent criminals are top priority to deport. And we all know that we need to make sure that we're not importing a bunch of competition for Americans and a bunch of competition for housing and all that stuff going forward. And those are the main problems. But you can't give the green light for anyone. You can't have this soft language that we're going to keep you in certain jobs, because I got to tell you, you not being able to have an illegal alien wash your cars or clean your house, that is not a justification for us to abandon law and order And we decided on this as a party already. And I don't know why Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't get the minutes to those meetings, but they're there.
From here on out.
Yeah.
And if anybody's mad at me for saying the truth, then I'm sorry.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, ladies and gentlemen, our next president. Sorry, JD Vance. Well, I mean, these people are saying it. I go to dinner parties.
Yeah, I heard you.
Well, by the way,
I heard you on Joe Rogan.
All right, that's Tim Dillon chiming in. All right, so Trump says the U.S. will hit China with 100% additional tariffs over rare earth restrictions. This was a real shock that came out on Friday. I do want to make sure that I make a couple of points here on this, because the check in with John Carney, our economic finance editor at Breitbart News. He's been writing a lot about this in our Breitbart Business Digest that we work on together. All of you should subscribe. That basically China's rare earth restrictions, it came as a surprise. And so all of a sudden, China had announced new restrictions on rare earths, stringent new restrictions on rare earth minerals that Trump wants, and we want to be able to trade peacefully to be able to get them. And all of a sudden, Trump says that he just learned that China is taking extraordinarily aggressive position on trade and sending an extremely hostile letter to the world, saying that they are no longer going to, effective November 1st, impose large-scale export controls on virtually every product they make, and some not even made by them. And all of this is about rare earths, which we need for certain technologies. And then so Trump is going to fight fire with fire in this, and that's his move. So he announced that he's going to have 100% tariff. It's all part of the deal, but he immediately, this was a reaction. And he basically called for a meeting with Xi Jinping, and he says he's going to impose the tariffs unless China, I think, comes to heel a little bit on the rare earths. So Carney says that China's miscalculated. They thought Trump wanted a deal so badly on the rare earths that they could weaken his hand ahead of a meeting with Xi Jinping. And he also thought that maybe China's interpreted the government shutdown as a sign of weakness for Trump's government, which it doesn't look like it. It seems like Trump is getting most of his stuff done. So China may have interpreted the shutdown as the government in disarray, which might not be the case, because Trump's used it as an opportunity to cut some stuff. He's got the peace going on in the Middle East, so he's focusing on other things that are productive. And so he thinks China may have overplayed their hand, and I hope Carney's right on this. So, but Trump bouncing back that we're going to impose tariffs, which, the market reacts negatively to this stuff, and it could make certain things more expensive in the short term. But again, it's all part of the deal. And Trump is so good on this stuff. And if he wants to get those rare earths and he feels like he's getting rolled by China, then he's taking a stand on our behalf. So, and again, maybe China did miscalculate that they see some of the stuff happening in Washington as a sign that Trump is weak. It feels like Trump is very, very strong right now, and maybe his strongest ever. All right. That's it for me for now. Let's bring in Brandon Gill, and we're going to talk to him about all this stuff and more right now. All right, new guest on the show, but probably familiar to anyone in my audience, is Congressman Brandon Gill from Texas. Congressman, there's a couple of major things I want to get to before I get into some of the things you're working on, what you're hearing from your constituents. But it's a historic day, all the hostages released by Hamas. And this is something that I think everyone who's a part of President Trump's coalition can share a little bit of the glory here. He gets most of the credit, but it feels pretty good on my end. What's your perspective as you get to Congress? Historic stuff seems to be happening just about every day, but this got to be pretty high on the list.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. I mean, this really is a massively historic day for the country, for America, and of course for our ally Israel. But listen, this is a conflict that has been happening for over 2 years, for whenever Hamas unilaterally started war against Israel by invading the country, murdering and raping innocent civilians. And then Israel decided we need to make sure that we can protect our people. So went into Gaza, said that we want two things. We want to get our hostages back. They had at one point 250 hostages, and we want to make sure that Hamas does not stay in power in a way that would stop us from having a lasting peace here. And those two goals oftentimes seemed somewhat contradictory or mutually exclusive, because the hostages were Hamas's sort of bargaining chip that they had with Israel. Now, under President Trump's leadership coming in sort of negotiating this peace, I think is a huge step in the right direction. We still have a lot of open questions here to see how long this is going to last. But the first piece of getting the hostages back is done, and that is a massive, massive win for us.
Yeah, it does seem like the biggest win, as I've been phrasing it, that was the main leverage that Hamas had over Israel. And so that really allows for progress, I think, to move forward at a much more quicker rate to clean up the region. And it just seems like Trump is forging all these new partnerships in the Arab world that at a pace you can almost barely keep up with all of it. What do we think is the highest hopes for what could happen with the Gaza region now?
Yeah, the hope now that we have the hostages back, the ones who have survived, is what we want to move towards is a lasting peace, and it is a a Gaza Strip, a Palestinian region that is willing to live peaceably with Israel, meaning not have another October 7th. Meaning be able to coexist in a way where you don't have large numbers of Palestinians, whether associated with Hamas or other militant groups, or Palestinian civilians who are chanting death to America or death to Israel, who are wanting and looking forward to another way to kill more Jews or kill Americans. That's what we're looking forward to. This is the first step in the right direction, but we're still a long ways, I think, from Hamas agreeing to all of the terms that President Trump put forward. So I'm optimistic, but don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves yet.
I do think that's the right approach, because again, it's going to be, this is it's a cliche that there's never peace in the Middle East, and this is the biggest step forward. But we have a lot of work to be done. But I'm just very optimistic, because it just seems like there's so many new players who seem like they really want to trust President Trump's vision and work with him, which is just so refreshing. And I think that's really the essence of all of this at the moment. I want to speak to something else that's peripherally related. Everything I'm hearing is it seems like military recruiting is just getting way better. And it just, every time Pete Hegseth is out there talking about how we're cutting out the DEI, we're cutting out all the woke nonsense, we're getting people in shape. I think all of the faith talk and religious talk that we're seeing in public life now, I think adds to some of that as well. It just feels like there's a lot of patriotism coming back. And I think we're coming up on our 250th anniversary next year. And I think people are getting ready for that. I know it feels like a patriotism on the rise a little bit. And I think that's only going to help us stay safe around the world.
It certainly does. I mean, imagine you're an 18-year-old in the United States, male or female, and you're saying, I want to serve my country. I want to be part of something that's bigger than myself. And I'm willing to risk my life to do that. So I want to do that by serving in the United States military, which you probably and rightfully think is somewhere where you can do a whole lot of good for the United States and for the rest of the world. You want to serve in that capacity in a military that values meritocracy, something that's not going to be pushing weird, perverted left-wing ideologies on you and on your on your other friends who are in the military as well. And I think that's, for so long, the left was weaponizing our military and using it as a sort of left-wing social experiment. Let's see how many trans soldiers we can get. Let's push DEI and let's value, racial diversity over just pure meritocracy. And I think that really beats down enlisted and all of our service members whenever they're being told that you're not here, you're not valued for what you can contribute to a greater cause, you're valued for your racial characteristics or your sexual preferences or something like that. And what we've seen since Pete Hegseth has come in and since President Trump has been in office is a refocusing on our military towards trying to be the most lethal fighting force in the world. That is their purpose. Yep. That's the military's purpose. It's to go out and do good for the world and kill people if needed. And I think that shift has boosted morale, as you would expect. People want to go in and be a part of, of this broader movement where you can actually do some good and not be a pawn in some left-wing, social program. So it's been extraordinary to see recruitment numbers spike under President Trump. I mean, this is the kind of leader that you want to serve under.
So Let's talk Shutdown now. And over the weekend, this will be airing for people Monday afternoon. But over the weekend, there's no movement at all, and it feels like I don't even understand exactly what the Democrats want. It feels like it really is about illegal aliens getting health care. It feels like that is the thing they want, but they won't say that's what they want, and it does seem like that's what it's about. I mean, what is this shutdown even about? Do we understand?
That is precisely what it is about. And let's take a few steps back. About a month ago, we knew that this funding deadline was going to be the end of September 30th. That's the end of last fiscal year. We knew that was coming up. And Republicans, we knew that what we want to get back to is what's called regular order. That's when the House passes 12 individual appropriations bills, which we then send to the Senate. They pass, and we'd send those to the president's desk. And that is Congress exercising its primary constitutional authority and its constitutional duty, which is the power of the purse. And that is how Congress determines on much more of a line-by-line basis where our tax dollars are going. That's the process we want to get back to. We want to move away from governing via omnibuses or continuing resolutions. Now, we were a little behind on that process, so what we said is we just need 7 more weeks. Let's get to November 20th, so we have some more time to pass those appropriations bills. So in order to do that, we will pass a clean continuing resolution. That's what Republicans put forward. Clean meaning we're not packing it with Republican priorities or conservative policies, which would be good policies, but we're just doing it. We're just passing a funding bill to keep the government open, and we'll do a clean CR because a clean CR should be palatable to Democrats. It's something they voted for 13 times under Joe Biden. It's something that Democrats voted for earlier this year. In other words, I think House Republicans went out of our way to provide something that Democrats would be willing to vote for, to actually work with them. And Democrats responded by saying, absolutely not. What we want to do is we want to provide free health care for illegal aliens, which they know is a non-starter for Republicans. So what Democrats are doing is they're taking policies that are unrelated to the government funding and saying, we want these policy wins, otherwise we're going to shut the government down. I mean, this is a government shutdown entirely orchestrated by Democrats in the Senate, led by Chuck Schumer, so that they can provide health care to illegal aliens, so that they can refund NPR and PBS in left-wing state-sponsored media. This is entirely on them, but I think you're right. The American people are starting to see this is actually what Democrats want. They actually are shutting the government down to provide health care to illegal aliens.
Yeah, exactly. And so is there one of the things that I think is great in a way because it's very clarifying if we can make the case, but I think we can. But also, how are they going to come off of this? I don't think they have an exit strategy here. So I just don't know. The Republicans have no reason to cave at all, I don't think. So what is the plan to get out of this thing? Because it just feels like it could go on forever.
Well, you're right. We don't have any reason to cave. There's nothing really to negotiate at this point. We put forward a very good faith continuing resolution, as I said. So all we need is Democrats to realize that it is good for the American people to keep the government open, keep it running, and then we can have the policy debates afterwards. I think where we're at right now is Democrats are caught in a position where they feel like they need to appease their radical left Marxist base in order to show them that they are somehow the opposition party that is stopping President Trump from implementing the agenda voters elected him to implement. One of the things that we're looking towards right now, so one of the theories that we kind of have is that there's this big No Kings, rally in Washington. It's going to be on the 18th. And that's the big Marxist Antifa, I Hate America rally. And it looks like Democrats don't want to open up the government until that rally is done because they don't want to optically be seen as caving to Republicans. So we'll see what they do after that. But this really is something where Democrats need to come to the table and say, let's reopen the government and then let's have some policy debates. And I don't see them doing that this week for sure.
Right, exactly. So are we just is there anything new to report as of Monday morning? this week?
Right now there's nothing for Republicans to debate. There is no discussion. It's whether the ball is in Senate Democrats' courts right now. So we'll see when they come to the table. But right now, that's where we're at.
Okay. All right. So I want to talk just about some of the stuff that you're working on. When you gave us a scoop on something that I think is pretty great, you got a bill to change DC procedures for juvenile offenders so that violent criminals are not always treated as children. Explain the nuances of this, but I think that it's culturally we're trying to crack down on crime here. It feels like everyone wants it. Tell me why you're taking this approach and what's in the proposal.
Yeah, I would start by saying Washington D.C. and that was the focus of the bill that we passed. My bill that we passed out of the House a few weeks ago. Washington D.C. is a crime-ridden hellhole. I mean, this is a city that is overrun by criminals, that is not safe to walk around in many parts. I mean, anybody who lives in Washington knows that there are certain no-go zones, places you just don't go because it's not safe. And whenever you think of the United States, this is our capital city. Our capital city should reflect the glory and the grandeur, I think, of the most powerful and the greatest civilization that has ever existed. And you start to get us there by cracking down on crime and stopping our streets from being controlled by criminal thugs. One of the problems in Washington, D.C., remember, this is a city with one of the highest murder rates in the country, one of the highest carjacking rates in the country, and a lot of that crime is coming from juveniles, particularly for carjacking. Over 50% of carjackings are from juveniles. One of the problems is that you have juveniles who are 16 right now, who can be tried. And I think if you're 16 years old, you're fully capable of understanding that you cannot go and break into somebody's car and steal it and take it from there. But these people, you have juveniles who are at 16 years old who are being tried as juveniles. I think they should be tried as adults. So what my bill did is it allows for certain particularly egregious offenses, murder, sexual assault, things like that, to try people as young as 14 as adults. This is particularly relevant. There was a case a few years ago of an Uber Eats driver. And two young girls came and they stole his car, and in the process they murdered him. This is a guy named Mohammed Anwar, and he was murdered as they were stealing his car. One of those girls was 15 years old at the time. She was tried as a juvenile. She's going to be released when she's 21. That's a 6-year sentence for murder. I think that's a huge travesty of justice.
Wow.
And this bill would have allowed her to be tried as an adult, to get the justice that I think she deserves.
Yeah, how could that be? I mean, it seems like this is the pattern. This is going to be, I think, an emerging theme of stories for us at Breitbart. It's just all of these people just committing violent crimes and then being undercharged. And it just coming on the heels of all the lawfare that took place against President Trump and his supporters, where people are just harassed with the long arm of the law for doing nothing and then overcharged. And then now we see violent criminals consistently undercharged. This just seems like a really hard problem to crack.
Well, I would say I don't think it is a hard problem. I mean, we can clean up our streets tomorrow if we're willing to actually lock up criminals and thugs who shouldn't be on the streets to begin with. If you look at a lot of major cities across the country that are crime-ridden, like Washington, D.C., what you have is a small number of repeat offenders who are the ones committing the majority of the crime. These are people who go out and they attack somebody randomly on the sidewalk. Then they steal somebody's car. And each time, police will arrest them, and the DAs will give them a slap on the wrist and let them back out on the streets. Those people need to be locked up. We need to be able to live in a civilization that actually values law and order, and left-wing DAs don't do that. So we're having to step in, and we're having to give the good DAs some more latitude to give more just sentences for violent criminals. But I think we also need to make sure that people who are committing violent crimes are off of our streets. All we have to do is uphold the law, but we need DAs as well who are willing to play ball here.
So, Congressman, what are your constituents talking to you about these days? What's the highest on their list?
Right now, the biggest topic of discussion is the government shutdown. And whenever the shutdown first happened, The questions I was getting from constituents was, are Democrats really shutting the government down to give health care to illegal aliens? Is that just a Republican talking point, or is that really what they're doing? And I think over the past 2 to 3 weeks, people can see very clearly that that is, in fact, the case, that Republicans are not playing politics here. We're just trying to do our jobs responsibly and effectively. So the conversation has shifted now to how in the world do Democrats think that this is a good idea to shut the government down over health care for illegal aliens? That's where we're at now. And I think that, the American people, especially in my district, are wanting to see Washington actually work responsibly and effectively and appropriately. And they're wanting to see Democrats reopen the government. But, I think the American people realize the ball is in their court. And we're just waiting for them to wake up and do what's right.
So what do they think is a solution to the shutdown? Or do they understand? That's the main point. Is it because the Democrats feel like, it seems hard to sell it, but it feels like that's what they're trying to do. That this really is the Republicans' fault that we've shut things down. I think now with the military pay off the table because Trump was able to restore that, there's almost no leverage they have over Republicans. So I'm wondering if this stalemate continues for that region and for that reason. And I'm wondering if your constituents get it. I know you have a pretty red seat, isn't that correct? It's a pretty red area.
That's right.
Where you are in Texas. Yeah. So, but they see it, right? They see the math here.
Oh, they totally see it. They see exactly what's happening. I think the American people are not stupid. They've seen Democrats push these kinds of left-wing policies that most normal people find repulsive. It was just a few years ago in the Democrat presidential debate where the moderator asked, please raise your hand if your health care program would provide health funding for illegal aliens. And every single candidate on the stage, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, raised their hands. I mean, that is the official party of the Democrat Party, official policy platform of the Democrat Party. So this isn't something that's new. It's not new to say this is something Democrats have been pushing. We're just seeing them willing to go as far as shut the government down to do that. And I think, again, we're waiting for Democrats to come to their senses, but there is nothing for us to negotiate. And I don't think the American people want us to be negotiating with them. I mean, this is a form of, I think, legislative terrorism, where Democrats are bringing in unrelated policy priorities that they have that very few people agree with them with, and are leveraging those, leveraging a government shutdown to push those. So the American people can see through that. I think they're on our side. Polling is showing the American people moving more and more and more on our side, and I think they'll continue to do that.
Congressman Brandon Gill from Texas, terrific stuff. Where can the audience find you online, and is there anything else that you want to share before I let you run?
Well, listen, you can find me on all social media platforms. We're very busy during this shutdown. The constituents of Texas 26 should know that our office is open. We're willing to work for constituents. We're happy to do anything we can. If you have issues related to the shutdown or anything else, our office is open. We are not taking any breaks here. And we're going to continue fighting to get the government reopened.
Wonderful. I love the energy. Great priority list as well. Focusing on crime, focusing on illegal immigration, focusing on getting the government to work for the people and not the other way around. Seems like a good way to conduct your business. Thanks, Congressman. Let's do this again soon.
Yep. Thanks, Alex.